Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to Long Island Wargaming. And in this video of All Things Skaven, I'm going to do a quick book review, just touch on the surface of the book, the units, some points, nothing too in-depth, but just perhaps this is a video for somebody who is maybe interested in getting a Skaven book or hasn't played Skaven yet or just wants to know a little bit more about them. So here we go. This book came out, I believe, in 2009. Yeah, 2009. This was the last book of 7th edition, I believe. And I don't think it's going to be updated anytime soon because it can hold itself in 8th edition. And there's a couple armies left that still need a new book that are waiting for revisions. But I wouldn't be surprised if they redo Skaven before they redo Wood Elves or Bretonnia, just because Skaven's a moneymaker for Games Workshop, and Bretonnia and Wood Elves, as much as people would like to see that redone, isn't one of the, highest grossing armies from what I've seen. I mean, you guys can tell me I'm wrong, but Skaven just appeals to a lot of people, so I think they're more likely to redo this, but hopefully not too soon, because then of course this video will be out of date. But I'm just going to dive right in and skip over all the fluff. And then first page I'm looking at is the Skaven Bestiary, which is cool because it goes through all the special rules. Scurry away, which is really cool whenever you flee, which happens a lot with Skaven because, I don't know, low leadership, if you don't have a lot of guys, or you fail panic tests, whatever. They flee at an additional +1. So if you roll 12, you're actually fleeing 13 inches. If you roll 1, or 2 I should say, then you're fleeing 3. But so that's always good. Strength in numbers is an awesome special rule. And your rank bonus, which is up to +3, you get to add that to your leadership, which is really cool because the Skaven army is really cheap in points. So when you've got 4 or 5 point units and you have, say, 30 to 50 of them in a unit, odds are you'll always have +3 rank bonus, or you'll always have a rank bonus in your units. So if you've got your clan rats, which are leadership 5, and they have a bunch of ranks, we'll say they've got at least 3, their leadership's now at leadership 8, which is pretty good. That's comparable to, some, empire units, which, I mean, might be leadership 7 or so. So that's really cool. And then when you have like a general, like a Grey Seer or a Warlord that's got leadership 7 floating around, you get to use their leadership before the additional +3. So when you've got a Lord on the battlefield and you've got plenty of ranks, odds are you're going to be rolling leadership tests on a 10 most of the time, which is pretty awesome. And then just to throw in Inspiring Presence from the 8th edition rulebook, when you're on a large target, your Inspiring Presence for a general is 18 inches instead of 12. So if you've got like if you've got a Screaming Bell with a Grey Seer in the middle of your army, odds are you'll have leadership 10 all around, as long as you've got ranks. You're doing a smaller points game and you just bring a Plague Furnace with a Plague Priest, and I think the Plague Priest is leadership 6. Yeah, leadership 6, so with your +3 ranks, leadership 9 all around. So, I mean, pretty good leadership as long as you have enough guys. So, when I get further into this book, you're going to realize you need lots of models for this army. You need lots of Skaven. I mean, most of my units are never ever less than 30, and sometimes up to 50. But you'll see often units that are this big. They're 50 long. This is a unit of 50 clan rats, and this is cheap points. So that's strength in numbers, which is a really cool special rule. And then Verminous Valor, which essentially allows heroes that have declined a challenge to go to the back of the unit, but you can still use their leadership, which is cool. Now, they have to actually decline a challenge to be able to go to the back of the unit. Now, I think in the older book, which I have around somewhere, but I'm not going to really bother, I think you're able to lead from the back always, which the downplay was you couldn't have your attacks, but being able to preserve your heroes, since most of the time they're low equipped, low armor, low toughness, they're easy to take out. And then the final special rule we have is the Skaven Warpstone weapon. So anything that's Warpstone counts as magical attacks, which makes Skaven really good against armies like Vampire Counts, but they've got a lot of ethereal and unkillable units that you just get stuck in combat with. So to be able to have, a good part of this book be Warpstone weapons is decent. This way, you always have those magical attacks for such enemies. And then also in this Skaven Bestiary is the Scavenge Pile, which is pretty cool. This is a little unique thing. They've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Excuse me. 5 like additional items that you could equip to not only your heroes but sometimes to some champions, which is pretty cool. Warp Musket. You can give a guy poison attacks. You can give him a tail weapon. You can give him a pistol. You can give him a Rat Hound bodyguard. So there's these little characteristic-like things that give the army some flair, which is cool. So first unit we're going to hit in is the Clan Rats. This is your meat and potatoes of Skaven, I think. They are a core choice, but they're the middle core choice. So you have your Slave Rats, Clan Rats, and Storm Vermin. So these are in between stat-wise and point-wise. Really nothing special beyond, they've got Scurry Away and Strength in Numbers, and they've got a decent, not decent, but an alright stat line. Pretty much Weapon Skill 3, Strength 3, Toughness 3 across the board. Initiative 4, which is good because they're pretty quick for a core unit. And movement 5. Skaven, for the most part, across the board, movement 5. A couple of them have movement 6, which is really cool. So this is a fast army. So next we have is our Storm Vermin. Now our Storm Vermin are a little bit better than the Clan Rats. They've got Weapon Skill 4, which is good, so they're decent warriors. Same Strength 3, Toughness 3. And then Initiative 5, so they're just a little bit faster, which is nice. And their Leadership is 5 also. When we get into this unit is actually able to bring a Magic Standard, which is good because you need that once in a while. And then the Champion, the Fang Leader, is actually able to take points from the Scavenge Pile, so you can give him an extra item, which is pretty cool. And then Skaven Slaves. Now these are the crappy warriors. Weapon Skill 2, Strength 3, Toughness 3, Leadership 2. So, without a hero nearby or in the unit, they are pretty bad. So hopefully they're within range of a general. Now with Leadership 2, if they have their Strength in Numbers, they can get up to Leadership 5. But odds are you want them near a Leadership 6 or Leadership 7 hero. This way you can get that, Leadership 9, Leadership 10. So these guys are good to just get in the way. And since with Steadfast, which is a new rule for 8th edition, which is awesome for Skaven, as long as you outrank your enemy, you're stubborn. And as long as you have your heroes nearby, your stubborn is Leadership 9, Leadership 10. So most of the time, you're going to be able to stay, hopefully, if you're rolling well. So these guys are just chaff. You just throw them up. You have to take them in units of 20 or more. But they're fun. I like bringing them. Now there's some quirky stuff to them. They have a special rule called Expendable, which essentially allows you to target the unit that they're engaged in by shooting attacks. So this is one or two of the only units in Warhammer that actually allow shooting into combat. So you pick the combat that you're shooting at, and then after hits are made, you randomize them. 1 to 3, you hit a friend. 4 to 6, you hit a foe. You hit one of the enemies. And then if there's multiple units, you have to further randomize it. But I mean, this is for shooting weapons. And then I'm pretty sure, this is how I've always played it. If you drop a template weapon, it hits the amount of guys that is under it. However, you still have to randomize it, which I think I mean, it depends on how people play it or how it's written in the FAQ, but I think you still have to randomize it if you're targeting that unit, because you can never target a unit that's engaged. So at this point, you're allowed to shoot into combat. So I mean, I'd have to check the FAQ, or if somebody knows how they would play that out, just put a comment below. But I've always done it that if I target the unit that the clan rats are in combat with and I get a direct hit and only hit the enemy, I still randomize it because I'm accessing the ability expendable to be able to even target them since they're in combat. But that's a little blurry, but for the most part, it's pretty cool for if you've got weapons teams and you want to shoot at a unit locked up with with the slaves. That's what I think they're good for, just locking up the enemy, getting some flank charges, getting some shots at them. Now their second special rule is cornered rats. They don't flee, at least from combat. When they break from combat, they essentially blow up. They just go crazy. So they affect all units within a D6 inch range. So if they're up near a bunch of units, and I've seen this go really bad for me, really good. It's fun. It's random, but they do D3 strength 3 hits for the first rank, and then an additional strength 3 hit for each rank after that. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. This is 10 ranks. So if I run this in and take no casualties, say all these guys are alive, and they break from combat, you're taking D3 plus 9 strength 3 hits. That's cool. But that also happens to any of your units that are nearby, but it could happen to a bunch of other enemy units. So once or twice I've done it where I've just make these huge long units, run them in, and usually with Steadfast they stay. But if they blow up, then they just do a bunch of hits, which is pretty cool. But you can't rely on them coming back. Now they can flee if they're fleeing from shooting or a panic test or the spell. So they can flee, but when they break from combat, they just go crazy. They go nuts. Rat swarms are cool. They are unbreakable because they're a swarm, and then they have all the special rules that swarms have in 8th edition, so they're just little waves of rats. And then next we move on to warlords and chieftains. Now, Warlord is pretty cool. Weapon skill 6, strength 4, toughness 4, initiative 7, 4 attacks, leadership 7. And the chieftain's just a step below. Weapon skill 5, initiative 6, leadership 6. And then they both have strength 4 and toughness 4, like I said. The Warlord has 4 attacks, Chieftain has 3, so they're standard heroes. They're pretty cheap too in points. And then we've got some mounts that are really cool that go with the usually with the Warlord. We have the Rat Ogre Bonebreaker, which is a souped up rat ogre that your Lord can ride on top of. And his stats are pretty decent. He's got weapon skill 4, strength 5, 5 attacks. So he's pretty good. And then we have the Great Pox Rat, which is a 40 millimeter base cavalry that your guy sits on. It's just a rat that has poison attacks, 2 attacks, weapon skill 3. It's cool. I rarely use it. I'd rather use the Bonebreaker because I think it's got a lot of attack coming out of it. And then the War Litter. It's essentially the Lord being carried in by 4 Storm Vermin, which is weapon skill 4, strength 4, initiative 5, 4 attack. As far as I know, they don't have models for these 3. I know there's a hero with there's a plague priest with a Great Pox Rat. However, the Rat Ogre, Bonebreaker, the Lord on Great Pox Rat, and the War Litter, you'd have to proxy those yourself. So if any of you have made any of those yourself, make a video response. I'd be thrilled to see it, and I'll also show you some of the ones that I've made. Next we got is the Vermin Lord. Now, the Vermin Lord is pretty expensive, but his stats are awesome. Movement 8, weapon skill 8, Ballistic skill 4, strength 6, toughness 5, 5 wounds, initiative 10. Initiative 10, which I think is higher than most of the greater demons. I don't know if any of the greater demons max out at 10. He's got 5 attacks, and then leadership 8. And he'll also have that Thunder Stomp attack in combat. But he's a level 4 wizard, and he can take spells from either lore, and then he can also substitute one of those spells for the Dreaded 13 spell, which is cool. We'll get into that. And then he's got Scurry Away, so he gets to run that extra movement. He's immune to Psychology, large target. He causes terror, and he's got a 5+ ward save. Now, with Leadership 8 and large target, if you ever use this guy as a general, you'd have that inspiring presence again, like I was talking about. With Leadership 8, though, so even if you're down to 2 ranks, you still get that 10 leadership, which is pretty cool. And then he's got Special Rule Rat Demon, and that essentially he is a demon, and anything that affects demons affects him as they would a regular demon. So anything in the Warriors of Chaos book, or the Demons book, or any magic items in different books that affect demons, he would be subject to that rule. And then he's got his weapon that he's equipped with called the Doomglaive, and it is essentially a D3 multiple wounds attack. So since he's got 5 attacks, he has D3 wounds for each one. So if you're fighting targets with multiple wounds, it's great. So fighting ogres, this guy's awesome. You have his spells, but in combat, he's always striking first no matter what with initiative 10. And he does D3 multiple wounds on all 5 attacks, which is pretty cool. And next we've got the Gracier, your standard Lord caster. And he comes level 4, which is great. You don't have to upgrade him. And he can take spells from either lore that the Skaven have, which is both Spells of Ruin and Spells of Plague. And he can swap out one of the spells for either Skitter Leap or the dreaded 13th spell. So you get to choose. Odds are you want to swap out for dreaded 13th spell because it's just awesome. Strength in Numbers, Scurry Away, Verminous Valor, and then he also comes with D3 Warpstone tokens. And then his mount is the Screaming Bell, which is pretty cool. And as impact hits, it gives magic resistance. It's a large target. It's pushed into battle by either Clan Rats or Storm Vermin. And it allows the Gracier to cast in a 360 range around it. It gives the Gracier an armor save. It gives the Gracier a ward save. It doesn't do too well with difficult terrain. It'll take some hits if it goes over terrain. And then pretty much the big thing is during the magic phase, before you cast any spells, you get to ring it. Now the first turn you only get to roll 1 dice, but all the turns after that you get to roll 3. And there's a chart that's marked 1 to 18. And if you roll doubles or triples, something bad could happen to you. But there's a bunch of different effects that it could have, whether it affects the unit pushing it, units around it. It could cast a spell, it can make the unit move. So I mean, the best ones pretty much allow all the guys in the unit pushing it to attack, whether they're in base contact or not. So if you've got 50 guys pushing the bell and you roll a 13, then you actually get to attack with all the guys in the unit, which is really cool. And that's the lucky number for Skaven, is 13. So there are a lot of cool things with the Screaming Bell, and it's a pretty awesome mount for the Gracier. And it makes the unit unbreakable, which is pretty huge too. Next we have is the Plague Monks. They essentially are zealots that are utterly dedicated to spread the corruption and decay in the name of the Great Horned One. So they're just these plague-ridden guys who are pretty tough. They got toughness 4, which is good for infantry and Skaven. Usually everything else is toughness 3. And they're armed with 2 hand weapons, and they're frenzied. So the front rank gets 3 attacks and then whatever support attacks. So these guys are pretty good whether they're in a horde formation or a rank formation. They're awesome. I love these guys. And then the hero to go along with that is the Plague Priest, and he could be a level 1 or level 2 caster, and he can always swap out for the Pestilent Breath spell. And again, he's frenzied. And he's a pretty good fighter. He's got toughness 5, and he has 3 attack space. So with the extra hand weapon, if you decide to give it to him in frenzy, it's 5, or if you give him a flail, 4 attack, strength 6 the first turn. So he's a decent fighter for a caster. Next we have is the Plague Censer Bearers. Now, these guys have giant flails that are called Plague Censers, which act as flails where the first turn they get the extra 2 strength, but anyone in base contact has to take a toughness test with them, which is pretty cool. So against low toughness armies, these guys could be an extra little punch before combat even starts. And then they also can use the rank bonus of any plague monks that are within 6 inches, so they're good to have alongside a plague monk unit. And then they're also stubborn if they're within 12 inches of the plague furnace. So these guys are pretty cool. The Plague Claw Catapult is a siege machine, and it does a template, large round template at strength 2 with no armor save. So it's pretty effective. It's got that big template. Against toughness 3 troops, this thing is pretty cool, especially if there's large blocks of them. And then the Plague Furnace is similar to the Screaming Bell. It's a mount for the Plague Priest. And the Plague Furnace has impact hits, magic res, large target, similar to the Screaming Bell. And then it's got this giant sensor on it that you get to use in your shooting phase, and it does strength 5 hits on an artillery dice worth of hits. Of course, if it misfires, you can hurt yourself or hurt the unit, which is annoying. But it also has a little shooting attack that it could do in close range. It makes the guys pushing it, which are the plague monks, unbreakable, which is pretty cool. So that's an awesome mount for the Plague Priest. Now, Night Runners are an infantry choice that get to move before the game goes, and they've got 6-inch move. So they have this little built-in vanguard, and that was before 8th edition, so they kind of had this little thing that no one else really had, and they get to move before the game starts. And they are armed with 2 hand weapons, which is pretty cool. And they have initiative 5, which is better than Clanrat, and they've got leadership 6. So if you have these guys ranked up, which is an option, it's not something I prefer, but with rank bonus +3, they've got leadership 9, which is pretty cool. And they've got a nice little attack. They've got weapon skill 3, strength 3, with 2 hand weapons, so that's pretty cool. And they also are armed with throwing stars, which is a short range weapon, but these guys are pretty cool. You can also give them slings. So what I've done in the past, when just experimenting with them, just move them before the game starts, move them the first turn, get them in range of slings, and then just have them sit there for the rest of the game shooting at the enemy. Assassins are guys that you get to hide in a unit, and they've got Scurry Away, Verminous Valor, always strike first, which is really cool. Poisoned attack, he gets to be a scout, or he gets to be a sneaky infiltrator, which is something that him and the Gutter Runners have, and I'll go into the Gutter Runners in a second. But you can hide him in a unit, so he doesn't appear until after after that unit has entered combat. And that's interesting. I don't know how you play it out if you're doing open lists. At least down here, what we do is play closed lists, so you don't know if the enemy even has an assassin. But in open list tournaments, you have to declare everything you have. So I don't know if you get to at least hide what unit he's in, but you know he's there. But either way, he can come in after the game starts, which is pretty cool. So he's good to just maybe start attacking some attacking some war machines or some weak infantry behind the enemy. And he's got this awesome dodge, which is essentially just a 4+ ward save. And then he is essentially a glorified gutter runner. And the gutter runners are a special unit that essentially are scouts, and they scrimmage. And they also have that sneaky infiltrator special rule where they could show up on later turns. Now they can also be armed with snare nets, which I personally don't really use, but the snare net, I believe, replaces one of their hand weapons, and the enemy gets -1 weapon skill, -1 initiative. That's cool, but I mean, that's up to you. Alright. Packmasters. Packmasters are used with your giant rats or your rat ogres. And your giant rats, or your packmasters, they are weapon skill 3, strength 3, toughness 3, leadership 5. The upgraded one is called a master molder, so it acts like a champion. Weapon skill 5, initiative 5, 2 attacks, strength 4, toughness 4, and he's got leadership 6, which is good. Now the packmasters and the master molders, they have strengthened numbers. Now the FAQ takes out strengthened numbers for rat ogres and giant rats. So you're going to benefit from the ranks for leadership as long as these guys are alive. Okay. And you can give them different equipment, which is cool. So giant rats are essentially just, I know giant rats sounds like they're bigger. They're actually smaller than clan rats. So they're essentially, if you look at a rat on the ground, they're bigger than that, but they're not as big as the human-sized clan rats and storm vermin. So giant rats are these cheap infantry that get to essentially take up space. You can field them in really small units. If you want 5 with 1 packmaster, I use that to just get in the way or to bait frenzied troops or attack fast cavalry. But the cool thing about these guys is they not only get support attacks, they get an additional rank of support attacks. So you can attack a lot. You can attack with a lot of them with their Wave of Rats special rule. And then rat ogres are pretty awesome. These guys are strength 5, toughness 4, weapon skill 3, and they also have frenzy. So they have this extra attack. They cause fear. They're pretty cool. Now you'll have less packmasters with them because you can only have 1 packmaster for every 2, I believe, or maybe 3. No, I think for every 2 rat ogres. But rat ogres are pretty awesome. They can deal out a lot of damage. But even with toughness 4, they are kind of vulnerable since you've got not a lot of them against shooting for the most part, or even higher initiative infantry, like say Hyles with great weapons. So you want to make sure you don't let those guys get shot up. Now. Next is the Hell Pit Abomination, which is a very controversial piece. It looks awesome. The thing is really cool, but I mean, might be a little broken. But I mean, that's up to your interpretation. It does impact hits. It has regenerate, which is awesome, a 4+ regeneration, and it has a special attack. Essentially, you roll a d6, kind of like a giant, if you're familiar with a giant. 1 to 2, you get feed. 3 to 4, you have flailing fists, and 5 to 6, you have avalanche of flesh. Which each of these does a different effect, but most often you're just getting a bunch of strength 6 hits against the enemy, which is really cool. Now, it is random move, so it might not be super reliable. It is 3d6, which isn't bad. On average, you'd be going around 9 to 10 inches a turn. If you roll triples, however, there's a chance that the thing could, it has like a misfire chart, so it could get an extra strength for the end of the game, or it could just not move altogether. Or it can move in a random direction, which is the most likely one to roll. Roll with 2 to 5. And having this thing go in a random direction isn't that great. So, pretty cool. And you can give them upgraded items, which are Warpstone Spikes, which give them Magic Res 1, which isn't that great, but it makes it count as Warpstone weapons. So if you're attacking, or you're playing against, say, undead, it would be awesome because all of his attacks are magical, which is good against ethereal. Alright, so your Warlock Engineers are a hero, and they could be they could not be a caster at all. You have to upgrade them to be a level 1 or level 2 caster, and you could always swap them out for Warp Lightning. But you can deck him up for combat, which, I mean, is an interesting choice because he is cheap, so you can equip him how you want. He has 15 points to start. So once in a while, these guys might just be used as a leadership buff for low leadership infantry like slaves. And he's pretty cool. He's a hero choice. Poisoned Wind Globadiers are pretty cool. They have these little globes filled with gas, and they throw them at the enemy. There's no strength value to the hits. It essentially just wounds on a 4+. So they're great against high infantry, high toughness, high armor troops. So like monstrous cavalry that have got a 1+ armor save, like the Skull Crushers, for example. They're pretty good against stuff like that, especially if they could be out on the flank since they're scrimmagers, and they can, throw their little globes. There's a chance they might hit themselves and hurt themselves, which is very Skaven-like. What would it be if there wasn't a chance to hurt yourself? And I like these guys. They're cool. Now, going on to our weapons teams. Storm Vermin and Clan Rats and the Poison Wind Globadiers and the Night Runners can take specific weapons teams, depending on which unit, and we'll go through them. So, the Warp Fire Thrower is the first weapons team. Well, let me just back up. Each weapons team is deployed with the unit, and if they're within a certain amount of space between its parent unit, they get a ward save of 4+, which is really cool. But they only have heavy armor, I believe, and their toughness is 3, and they only have 1 wound, so they're very squishy. But if you can keep them hidden, they can be very effective. Now, the Warp Fire Thrower is a flame template attack, strength 5, D3 multiple wounds, -2 armor save, and it goes the distance of an artillery dice. So this thing's pretty cool. It can also counter shoot, which is pretty awesome. Rattling gun is pretty cool. It's essentially this little Gatling gun. And you get to roll dice to see how many hits you get, and you could choose to keep rolling. And if you roll a double, then you're done. It misfires. But if you roll, say, a 4, and then a 2, and then a 5, and you decide to stop there, 4, 6, 11, you got 11 shots off. You still have to roll a hit, which is, not the end of the world, but it's pretty cool. And the older book was a lot better because I believe it automatically hit. But Doom Flare is cool. It's this little impact hit weapon where it just this giant wheel with spikes on it, and it just crashes into the enemy and does some impact hits, but during combat it does an artillery dice worth of attacks, which is really cool. But of course that means it could misfire. And it has an armor save, an upgraded armor save, which is pretty cool. Poison Wind Mortar is this giant mortar that goes with those Globadiers, and it essentially does the same effect. It has it's an artillery that scatters like a stone thrower, and it can use the small template, and anything underneath it is wounded on 5+, and then anything under the middle circle is a 4+. So if you're shooting against something like Chaos Warriors, where they're high armored, it doesn't matter. On a 5+, that's it. They take a wound, no armor save, which is really cool. And then the Warp Grinder can be attached to Night Runners, and I believe maybe Gutter Runners. And it essentially is, it allows you to put a marker down before the game starts, and your guys can tunnel their way up into this random part on the battlefield, which is really, really cool. Warplock Giselles are these giant sniper rifles, high strength. They only do 1 damage, but these guys are pretty cool. Next is the Doom Wheel, giant hamster wheel, essentially. A bunch of rats are just running in it, making the thing spin, and it does some shooting attacks, which can be really devastating. It does 3 shooting attacks at the strength of an artillery dice, and then it does does D6 multiple wounds. So it can be unpredictable, could blow yourself up. But I mean, this thing is one of those high risk, high reward kind of units where it could hurt yourself because it hits the closest unit. So odds are it could hit yourself as long as I mean, you could try to refrain from shooting by doing the leadership test, but leadership 7 is only average. And it does pretty decent in combat, especially when it hits, because it does impact hits d6 plus 1. But the thing is, it's pretty cool. I like this thing. It's good against taking out giant monsters or even monstrous cavalry. Say, say Mornfang. You get up there with that shooting attack, and it does the shooting attack in combat too. So, say you roll a 4, an 8, and then a 2. But I mean, the 4 is going to wound on a 4, the 8 is going to wound on a 2, and I mean, D6 multiple wounds, no armor save with those higher strengths. It's pretty decent. Warp Lightning Cannon, really interesting. Now the old one used to just be it shot a straight line and did wounds like that. Now this thing functions as a cannon, but it also has a template, so it shoots this giant brass or this giant orb, similar to the globe launcher, the poison globe launcher, and it will do a strength damage, like a cannonball, but it does it the strength of the shot that you rolled on the artillery dice. So if it bounces, say 6 inches, it does strength 6 hits. If it bounces 2 inches, only strength 2, so that's not that great, and it's also covering less space. But it also drops the template where the shot lands at the strength of the roll. So it's very unpredictable, but could be super effective depending on what angle you're shooting at or where that template lands, at what strength it lands. If it lands on infantry at strength 6, 8, 10, awesome. But you have to do a lot of math and calculation of where you want to shoot it and how far you think it's going to bounce. But that's it for the units. Now there's a bunch of special characters, which I'll go over in another video. And then the Skaven magic, I'll go over quick. There's 2 different lores. There's Ruin, and then there's Plague. So Ruin has, some magic missiles and some, quirky little things. Template weapon. You can give a unit a Death Frenzy, which gives, Frenzy at +2, but then you suffer D6 automatic wounds. And then there's the Plague, which I prefer Plague. I think it's a lot better. It's got these spells which may be looked at as being broken, especially one that reduces an enemy's toughness by 1 for the remainder of the game. You can't dispel it. And Plague, which is the top spell for the Skaven spells of Plague, it causes your entire enemy unit to take toughness tests, which is, pretty scary. But it can continue against, you can bounce it around, hit other enemy units, or it can misfire and come back and start hitting your units, but still super effective. Now, Grey Seer or a Vermin Lord can swap out for the Dreaded 13th spell, which is a really cool spell. Even in 8th edition, still hard to cast. 25 plus. Now, 25 plus in 7th edition was even tougher because I believe you maxed out at maybe 5 power dice. But this thing is it's pretty crazy. It affects 4d6 infantry, and it just essentially removes them from the battlefield. No saves, no armor save, no ward save, no regen. And if that roll of 46 is larger than the amount of units that are in that unit, then it actually turns into a unit of clan rats, which is pretty funny. I've seen it work, I've seen it do nothing, but just to be able to generate a unit, say there's 10 guys in that unit and you roll a 12, you get 10 guys. Pretty cool. So that's essentially the Skaven magic and the Skaven units. Now I'm just going to look at the points quickly just to see if there's anything that sticks out, but everything else will be broken down a little bit further in each video. But let's see. I mean, the core units are so cheap. Clan rats are 4, slaves are 2, and then you equip them however you want. Giant rats are 3, so there's some really cool things that you can get for very low cost points. And then, so your core is clan rats, storm vermin, slaves, night runners, giant rats, and rat swarms, which are, the rat swarms are just these little bases with all those rats on them. So that's your core. Because remember, the way I went over them was broken down into clans, the Skaven clans. Special, we have gutter runners, rat ogres, plague monks, plague censer bearers, warplock Jezzails, poison wind waters. And then rare, we've got the Hellpit Abomination, the Doom Wheel, the Warp Lightning Cannon, and the Plague Claw Catapult. And then at the end of the book, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pages of magic items, which will be missed dearly when they redo this book because all the new books have little to no magic items in them. But this one's got so many, and they're so much fun. So use it while you can, enjoy it while you can, exploit it while you can, because there's some really nasty stuff in here. And so that's it. So click below for the index if you want to jump around to a different video, learn some more in-depth stuff about the units. Now, when I go over each unit, I'm going to go over what I think about them, what I think they're good at doing, what I think they're bad at doing, what armies they're good against. So this was just kind of a quick brush over of everything. And questions and comments, feel free, post them below. Other than that, thanks for watching.